welcome back. Liz Kershaw and David Whitting for their look on the papers. And David, as you say, we have the Deputy Prime Minister and the Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, just after a 8:45 this morning. And this is the story you want to begin with. He's going to be talking about rape trials. You take this from the Times.
Yes, some specialist courts are being set up to boost the number and the speed of rape cases going to trial. I mean, there's been some concern for many, many years that the number of offences of rape that lead to a prosecution are terribly small, and the number of people who are then convicted from that group is also small. To give you an example of the figures, there was 67,000 offences of rape reported by police last year. Barely 700 of them led to a prosecution. That's about 1.3% of the total. And so what Dominic Raab is announcing is some specialist rape courts at Leeds, Newcastle and Snaresbrook in London, where people would be, the officials would be taught in trauma management and so forth, and given special skills to handle these cases and get them to court quicker.
Because a lot of this is down to the way that these crimes are investigated, aren't they? The Victim Commissioner was writing this morning saying a lot of it's to do with the gathering of evidence. Victims are asked to hand over their phones and their social media. Their data is handed over to police officers, and it's at that point where many victims simply bow out of proceedings. They don't want those cases to go to court.
Absolutely.
So it does need to start right at the beginning, doesn't it?
Yes, because what sometimes happens, as you rightly say, they look at text messages and the emails on the victim's phone, and often the defence use information there which perhaps a bit of flirting with other men, which nothing to do with the offence, which they use then to show that the victim is a person of low morals, and that is used to undermine the case. And there is some concern that perhaps there should be a limit on the information which is accessible from those men.
Okay. Let's go to Liz now. And here's a question for all of you watching and listening. Who owns the bottom of the sea, the seabed around the UK? And the answer is, Elizabeth?
The Queen.
Another Elizabeth.
The Queen. Yeah. Oh, I know. I'm so pleased to get that new tube line after me that I went on yesterday. I was, yes, the Queen is coining it in apparently, because the more and more wind farms that are built, offshore wind farms, where the structures are embedded in the seabed, put money in her bank account because they have to pay rental on the land. She owns the seabed. I didn't know that, did you? No, so all this, no, okay, I'm not casting aspersions, but it's not surprising Prince Charles, who's set to inherit all this one day, fiercely believes in offshore wind farms, is it? It's just some...
Each one was time they get rent on it.
Yeah, I just thought this was an astounding fact that...
what have they done to get that? You know, it's a radius off the coast, a certain radius.
Yeah, I know that she owns all the beaches in the UK are public, aren't they? Unlike in some countries. Mm-hmm. But the Crown owns beaches, but not just the beaches, when the tide goes out and beyond. So when you see all those, I think they look majestic, some of these wind farms out at sea, but they're all embedded in the Queen's property, and she's making money out of it.
But it's money they clearly don't need. That's money that should be given to charity, one would have thought.
Well, it pays for,
servants.
It pays for expenses,
yeah, something like that. Well, there you go.
David, I love this story. Sussex wine, apparently on par with wine produced in Champagne, Rioja and Tuscany.
Yes,
tell us a bit more.
There's been quite a lot about English wines lately, and the wines from there are quite good. They're a little bit more expensive, I find, but they are very good. And the Sussex wines are to be given a PDO, which is a protected designation order, a bit like the term brie or cheddar cheese. I think there's only one other one in Britain, and that's for some...
Melton Mowbray pies, did they have one?
And anyway, so it will be like Rioja, Tuscan wines, or Bordeaux. We'll talk about Sussex wine. But while that's good news for the English wine manufacturers, there's a little bit of a row brewing, it says here in the Telegraph, because the vineyards in Kent, just across the border, say, hang on a minute, why has Sussex got it and Kent hasn't? Because Kent is the other wine producing region. In fact, the they border each other, and the wines are very similar in nature because they have the same limestone
Bedrock.
soil and bedrock.
Does the Queen own
The
that?
Queen owns that as well.
So yes, we'll be soon be going saying, let's have a glass of. Should we have a glass of Champers? No, let's have a glass of Sussex.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
Tell you what doesn't sound good. You know, anyone who goes through, there's huge menopause awareness for women, and there's so many menopause champions, people who speak out about it, and whatever. Your take is somewhat different. This is from the Daily Mail.
Well, the cry today is please don't over-medicalise the menopause. Yes, it can cause women great problems, but don't put the fear of God into all women thinking they're going to go through this. But on the back of this, it's another issue that I read about recently, and then I was asked a question about it by a friend who lives abroad. Why is there this menopause drugs crisis in the UK? So I had to explain the increased demand, the celebrities, the lack of ordering by the NHS. But then I got onto men have hormones too and suffer greatly. Last night, Tom Jones I went to see, he's 82 and he looked fantastic and healthy, and he said to the audience, yes, everything now is still fully functional. Well, almost everything. And there was this nervous ripple of laughter throughout the largely older crowd among the men. And I've been astounded by what I found out recently. There's a huge issue with male testosterone levels declining as you age, and it's not getting the treatment. Men don't get the treatment or consideration that women get. So from the age of 40, your testosterone levels decline 1% a year. So by the time you're 70, you've lost 40% of your testosterone. Why is this important? Because it means you can develop man boobs, you can get depressed, you lose your libido, you can't function sexually.
Muscle tone.
It's moods. It affects relationships because women suspect, oh, he doesn't want me, so he must be having an affair.
I tell you, every time I raise this with doctors or indeed women, it's mocked and laughed at.
Yeah.
It is literally.
Yeah.
And I say, well, I'm a great believer, and I think men go through something, some sort of, they call, the change of life.
Yeah.
There has to be some sort. I mean, look at David Woody. You just have to look there. I mean,
Adonis. Well, you don't.
My daily testosterone jab.
The male menopause isn't about going out and buying yourself a big Harley Davidson because you can afford it, or a new Porsche because you're now 50 odd and the kids have left home. It's about real physical suffering and the breakdown of marriages and relationships and people laughing. So everybody I've tried to talk to about this, the men in my life, my brother and everybody, in David Wooding this morning, they all go, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. Oh, so one person says to me, oh, I'm 60 and I'm horny as ever. Nobody's going to...
It's not just about that.
No, women will talk about this, and they are doing so widely and loudly now. But try talking to a man and saying, is everything all right? Why don't... But if you do, the other aspect is which I looked into. If you do go to the NHS, we have in the NHS, obviously, everybody knows about gynecologists. Mm-hmm. The equivalent for men is an andologist.
Didn't know that.
They don't exist.
Oh, right.
They don't exist in the NHS. There's no specialists. Mm-hmm. They're the people who should be looking at men's hormones and prostate's another issue. Something like a huge percentage of men over 70 have got, at best, an enlarged prostate, or at worst, prostate cancer. Right. But men are their own worst enemies because they'd rather bat it off and laugh about it than get sorted out.
Okay. If you agree with that, you got a tale to tell. You don't agree, get in touch, tweet us at GBNEWS.
David, there's a story in the Times this morning, lockdown books. We were reading lots during lockdown, and it shows no end.
Yeah, we've rediscovered the joy of reading, Ellie, it seems, because the Times is saying that the sales peak that that the booksellers, bookshops saw during the pandemic is showing no sign of abating. In fact, it's taking off. And in fact, if you turn into the business pages of the Times, there's a piece in there not connected to that story, but it is in a way, because W.H. Smiths have seen a boom of 23% in the bookshops they have in airports. They have something like 500 or 600 of these shops.
You know what I say, David? I say, who's got time to read. Honestly, it's not for me. People like us, we devour newspapers, we devour magazines, we're reading all the time. I reckon people who are reading novels aren't reading what we're reading and vice versa.
I think there's a point there. I mean, I don't have time to read books often. And not only do I have to read newspapers every day,
Yeah.
I have to read these thick, but in more ways than one, boring Commons reports, which are heavy-going reading,
Yeah.
and then try and turn them into sense for your...
Fiction or non-fiction section.
We have to do that. So when I go on holiday, I love to buy a piece of fiction. I won't read any biographies. I'm
Yeah.
trying to read something that is just for the pleasure of reading. I don't often get that pleasure at home during the year.
I wonder if this is in conjunction with everyone jetting off on their holidays there in the airport chaos, and everybody does what we do and buy novels in the airport and then head off on holiday.
The other thing, of course, Ellie, is people read it on a Kindle now.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that the printed
That's
word...
declined though, actually, hasn't it? It was like at one time all bookshops are going to close and everybody's going electronic and on Kindle, and everybody was getting them, and then people have given up on them and gone back to physical books.
What about audio books?
They're all right in the car, aren't they?
I worry that would make me nod.
Honestly, yeah.
You need to listen to some
problem there.
crime or something.
Yeah, something a bit scary. So anyway, Elizabeth, Ellie was talking there about buying a book and heading off
Yeah.
your holiday. A lot of people seek the sun and
Yeah.
may not have to leave the UK to seek the sun this year.
No, it's lovely this week, isn't it? Absolutely gorgeous evening last night. Across France and continental Europe today, it's going to peak. In Paris, it's going to be 39, 40 degrees. Now that is hot. I just thought to put it into context because all the newspapers are getting a bit hysterical about, heat wave. We're all going to die. It could reach 34 degrees tomorrow, which is hot. But in actual fact, the hottest day in June on record was in June 1976, the really memorable year for those of a certain age.
Yeah.
Standpipes and all the rest of it, empty reservoirs. And prior to that, and that was 35.6 degrees. And prior to that, the same temperature in June 1957. So it's not a heat wave yet because you have to have a certain temperature for 3 consecutive days or more. And we're not going to achieve the all-time record for the UK this week, just so everybody doesn't panic.
Well, it's very pleasant anyway.
It is.
Long may it last. Guys, really appreciate it. Liz, thank you very much indeed. David, thank you very much indeed.